Hi, Matt Roberts with D1 Ticker and AthleticDirectorU. I'm here today with Gene Taylor, the athletic director at Kansas State, with Babcock with Virginia Tech, to talk about their communication strategies with not just their presidents or chancellors, but also with the executive cabinets on their respective campuses and strategies around how to build the right relationships and who helps move athletic department initiatives forward. So I'm curious for both you guys to start. Educate me on how executive cabinet meetings work on your respective cabinets, your respective campuses. Who prepares the agendas? How much time you have to reflect on the agenda when you know you're going into a meeting, and then generally when you know you are presenting something to the group, what type of strategies you use to prepare for those opportunities too. So, Gene, if you'll lead us off, please.
You know, our president is very efficient. He's the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, President Myers. So. We run pretty efficient meetings. They're typically only about an hour and a half at the most. We get our agenda about 2 days before. Typically not a lot on it. There's usually one presentation from somebody on campus about something pertinent to what's going on our campus. And then he goes around the table and we give him updates. If we do have something to present to them, we got to send it to his chief of staff to review it and then talk about it in advance. But typically our meetings are very, very efficient with him being our leader.
How many people in the room?
There are 10 people. And typically if you can't make it as executive cabinet, he does want to have a replacement there, so somebody from your department. So if our provost isn't there, then their assistant will show up, so we try to have somebody there from each department each week.
Whit, what about in Blacksburg?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. Matt, I'd say, in a lot of those meetings, it's really just 50,000 foot type stuff. I certainly don't want anybody there to get caught off guard, so I'll update on what I need to. And quite frankly, I like learning the big picture stuff on campus. But the president uses some smaller groups for some more in-depth dialogue. I also find that going to them is bigger reason as I go to them is to certainly support the president and the academic leadership that we are in it together. And I think building those relationships across campus are more important than ever. A couple decades ago, I believe athletic departments thought we could operate separate, and that proved not to be a good model. And this is more refreshing, but the whole part of it is just to be a member of the team, and I like that part. And it's I want them to see us when things aren't going wrong.
Are you guys taking notes during these meetings? Are you just jotting down the high-level stuff? Kind of what's your retention of the information style?
I typically take notes depending on the subject. Sometimes it's just, like you said, general information, 50,000 foot. But I like to take key pieces back to my staff, my senior staff, and share it with them because we meet. Our cabinet meetings, our president's cabinet meetings aren't always the same day. They're kind of fluctuates based on his schedule. But I always like to try to keep my staff updated, particularly on like you said, the 50,000 foot, or if there's something very specific that like you said, no surprises. I usually do that directly with the president, and I'll say, should I bring this up at cabinet, and then he kind of makes the decision, yes or no. But yeah, I'm taking notes just to make sure I can share it with our senior staff in the athletic department.
You've been an AD now at a couple different institutions, been at Virginia Tech for 4+ years. We can come back to that. been at Virginia Tech for 4+ years. You think back to your time, let's say at Cincinnati, and how you shaped in your mind who was who of importance on campus.
Right.
Was that easier when you went to Virginia Tech because you had a sense of what role everybody plays, or did you have to start that process over? Walk me through the framework of learning that.
No, it absolutely is easier the second time. But the first time I realized that going through the interview process to become an athletic director, right, there's typically a lot of university leaders and administrators in the room. It's not all athletics. So they're involved in hiring you. I quickly realized how important a general counsel was. I mean, there's a lot of positives in our world, but in the litigious nature of things, and that was somebody you better get to know pretty quickly as well. But I like to know the deans. I try to go see them once a year. It's probably now about once every other year. Go to their offices with no agenda, learn what they have going on, and it has to be genuine, right? But I'm also doing it because I want to be a well-rounded part, but also, I want them to know the person over there. And athletics sometimes can bring great attention to schools, but when things go a little rocky, it's nice that the academic side knows you're one of them, and it's a team approach.
there are times, I'm sure, in both your athletic careers where the light bulb has gone on when you've had a relationship with a dean or a general counsel or a provost when a decision maybe has gone in your way because of the relationship that you've built. Can you identify quickly, maybe way back in your, not that you guys, are too seasoned, but that the light bulb truly went on, you said, okay, I get it. Now I understand the purpose of building genuine relationships with folks on campus who can help. Can you identify maybe where in your career you were when?
For me, it was probably at North Dakota State. It was my first job as athletic director. And even though we're a smaller community, I realized how important deans were in support of athletics, not only from the academic side. If we had a young man or young woman that maybe we're trying to get in a little bit and some help from an academic standpoint, or if somebody's struggling, we want to make sure there's a positive relationship with those deans, particularly because they oversee the faculty, and sometimes faculty occasionally might not agree with athletics, and so you've got to have that conversation, and it's great if you have a great relationship, that dean can help you out. But I realized that early on at North Dakota State that relationship was key. You have to have a relationship on campus, no question.
Well said.
Is there a difference in communication style? I'm guessing because of the backgrounds of your all's two presidents, there might be a difference in communication styles. How does President Sands like to be communicated with on key issues?
And that's a great question, because what I've learned is it doesn't matter how I want to communicate. It's just how does he or she want to receive it. But I love it. He cares about athletics. He gives us the freedom to do things, and I certainly show him the respect by certainly doing the best job I can. But again, never letting him get surprised. I love that relationship. I bet working for a former military leader is really cool from a leadership standpoint. Dr. Sands came from a provost background. But having the right president to work with is huge. And I used to hear that probably like Gene when I got in early. And I remember thinking, I just want the job. I'll figure out the president later. And now I realize how naive that was. So that's a long answer. But really, you just learn how they want to be communicated with, and you learn to appreciate certain styles. Some like text, some like calls. We don't do too many emails about things that are really top level.
You've brought up a subject that I think a lot of people who will watch this video, and as we know, those in our industry who are aspiring to be an athletic director, I just want to get in the chair and then I'll figure out the president piece. I'm guessing you would advise, hey, do a little bit more due diligence in the opposite direction before you interview.
Yes and no, but I also know how hard it is to get those jobs and when you've worked for it. But it can make your career better or worse, longer or shorter, and just to have somebody there that has your back. So I've learned to appreciate it a lot, and learning about higher education. So yeah, it's just you want to be a part of the team, and it also gives you a chance, and that's what I was going to say earlier when I lost my train of thought, to educate the campus cabinet too on the successes of your athletes as students, right? And I think Virginia Tech and K-State have a great balance of athletics and academics, but when you can educate and change some stereotypes and use that format about some of your students, I like that part too, so they can see them more than just what they see on the field or court.
How do you deal with somebody on a peer on campus who may be on the executive cabinet who either verbally or through action may not support athletics to the degree that you would like them to, or that you feel is fair is a tough word, so I won't use fair, but how do you deal with that type of
typically, fortunately, I have never really had that blatant somebody where they just hate athletics, but there's been times that we don't always agree, so I try to do that one-on-one, and I'll, if something's going on that they're uncomfortable with, I'll go over and have a conversation and say, okay, help me understand where you're coming from, let me explain how we got to this situation, whatever the case may be, but it's a lot better if I do it one-on-one, because then you can, explain what's going on, and like you said, you can touch on the non-athlete part of what they're doing on campus, and they're doing so many good things, and they're going to school, they're doing community service, and sometimes I think people might just focus just on the athlete side, and there's way more to what their lives are like.
Yeah. You all have mentioned general counsel, you've mentioned deans. What are some other key roles that maybe don't get a lot of love on the athletic side of the table that are obvious players that ADs and aspiring ADs need to get to know that play a really key role for you guys?
Student affairs, in my opinion. I mean, they touch so many places on campus. Obviously, they a lot of times have oversight of the university discipline policy. So, if athletes get in trouble, make sure you're on the same page on how you're going to handle that athlete. Obviously, typically in athletics, we are a little bit more harsh with our discipline than the university is, but understanding their role because the oversee dorms, they are really key point in my
Yeah,
position.
well said. Academics, admissions, all that, right? Student affairs. I would add, and I know Gene went to advancement, development.
Yeah.
Because, right, that you don't want to have turf wars over donors and other things. And so that's another thing you can work with campus on and maybe offer some access to some of their campus donors, not necessarily tickets, we make them pay for that. But if you can do a few favors on campus and help them raise some money sometimes where there's absolutely nothing in it for you. And again, I keep going back to it, but that team approach and sometimes just your presence and being one of them helps a lot. And we do some things over holiday break when you don't have students in the stands where we do $5 faculty staff tickets and other things. And I just think, yes, you're cultivating them to be your fans, but you're also maybe humanizing what you do over there because the money we make and pay and the visibility, I'm sure that's tough for a lot of folks that are really busting it on campus and to see that sometimes.
It's a great point.
Some of the strategies you just described, rural market, metro market, you've been in both. You've been, well, Manhattan's not either maybe, but Fargo certainly one of the other.
Right.
DNA of faculty that needs to be included in your thought process and decision-making process, DNA of the university, differences in the institution you think play a role in all these questions maybe that we're going after here?
Well, I've been in 2 land grants, and obviously Virginia Tech's a land grant.
Right.
And there is a uniqueness about being a land grant institution. I don't know if it's, I don't know what it is, but both Fargo, North Dakota State, and Kansas State, there's a lot of similarities between just how they operate, how, you know, what their belief systems are, what their culture is. So I've been very fortunate to be a part of 2 land grants, and faculty just seem to be all in a lot.
Right.
I don't know, they just seem to be bought into the whole, like you said, the whole campus. It's not just athletics. We all want to have success together. And when athletics has success, or academics, or research, or development, everybody really celebrates that. And it just seems like a land grant buys into that a little bit better.
I agree. Yeah, and I loved working at Cincinnati. That's the only city I've ever lived in. It was outstanding. And some days it was good to be on quote page 8 of the newspaper, if there is a newspaper anymore. Like you learn and you can make some mistakes, but with the Reds and the Bengals and so much other interest, that was unique. But you're right, the land grant typically are in rural areas. There's not a whole heck of a lot to do, but it's the whole campus all in it together, and I prefer that. Although, again, I loved it at Cincinnati, but that's more my fit, and it's nice when you just see purple or maroon and everybody's all in. I think that helps a lot with the relationships too.
I told Whit, you know you're in when the garbage cans in your community are purple.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Get the buses the right color, everything. Yeah, they're all in.
That's interesting. Some key takeaways that you guys might pass on to the next generation of ADs in terms of dealing with executive cabinets. Preparation, clearly, don't surprise anybody, build individual relationships. What would be a couple others that I'm missing that we've talked here?
You know, I think just being patient, right? And you know, the world of athletics is obviously can be very stressful, and we're in the forefront of so many good things and sometimes not so good things, but just having the patience with those around you to be able to explain what's going on. And I think patience is another one.
Yeah, that is good. I would add to that for the ones I'm becoming. You can't start too early on the campus relationships. You know, if you're in marketing, I think the people in the Alumni Association, it is a big part of it, and not that you're doing it in a manipulative way. It needs to be genuine. But this becomes a fairly small world after a while, and that provost at one school might be somewhere else. And just like coaches and administrators, you never know where those folks are going to go. So I think being able to put yourselves in their shoes, and you're right, things might move a little slower, but you have to respect the job that they do and maybe try to see it where they're coming from. And that's a huge part of our job, is just bringing people together and communicating. So for the younger, or they don't have to be younger, less experienced ones, don't underestimate it. And I would learn a little bit about the general counsel and HR before I became an AD. I had to learn that on the fly. And when you're making changes and things like that, so if I could close with anything on that, the general counsel and HR, knowing a piece of that before you ever get in the chair will save you a lot of trouble.
Excellent.
Yeah, save you a lot of trouble on the back end if you
Might
make
keep
the
you
right
employed too, that's
exactly.
Appreciate you doing this, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Thanks
Thanks,
a lot.
man.